In time to 1953. Why 1953? It's the beginning of the King's career. And I always think it's interesting to kind of learn about what goes on behind the legend. Everybody has kind of a common belief that Elvis Presley jumped onto the national stage in 1956 and became an overnight sensation, changed the way music would forever be listened to and played. However, that's not the entire story. And so tonight we're going to delve into that a little bit more. For we find in 1953-54 there are two people that play a very big impact on Elvis Presley getting to where he is. So let us set the stage. America, 1953. The South is still segregated. There are black schools, there are white schools. There are white radio stations, there are African-American radio stations. The music acts that are top of the charts, Perry Como, Percy Faith and his orchestra, Dean Martin. America is a very different place than the America we know today. A hot July day in Memphis. An 18-year-old truck driver who's making $1 an hour walks into the Memphis recording service and promptly pays $4 to make a two-sided record, which he claims is going to be for his mother. I say claims because his mother doesn't have a birthday, we're not near Mother's Day, so it's conjecture at this point whether he was actually doing it for that reason or if he was trying to get noticed, but we'll leave that legend for another time. While he's waiting to record the record, he speaks to the receptionist and she makes small talk with him and she asks him, well, who do you sound like? And he says, quite confidently, I don't sound like nobody. He promptly records two ballads, My Happiness and That's When Your Heartaches Begin, and takes his record home. January 19th, 1954, he comes back to the studio, pops down his $4, makes another record. This time he engages Sam Phillips in conversation. Now Sam Phillips is the owner of the Memphis Recording Service, and for whatever reason, Sam takes down his name and number and says he may call him sometime in the future. Well, July of that year comes around, July 5th, and Sam calls Elvis back and says, come on into the studio. The reason for this, Sam, sensing that there is this great, back in the day it was called race music, and he wants to bridge that over to the mass audience, and he's looking for a singer that possesses the soul. And he hears something in Elvis's voice that he thinks he could be his guy. So he calls him in. Elvis comes in with Scotty Moore and Bill Black, and they begin to record. Now, Sam nurtures Elvis. He doesn't tell him it's going to be a recording session. He says, come on in and just jam. So they start jamming, and they go through all the songs that Elvis knows. A lot of them tend to be ballads, which Sam really isn't interested in. He wants to see if he can uncover something else. But he patiently lets them go about their business. Eventually, they take a break, and Elvis begins to just fool around on his guitar, strumming That's All Right, Mama. Scotty and Bill join in. Sam races in because he's heard the sound, and he says, what are you guys doing? And their reply is, just fooling around. And he said, well, let's fool around some more and get this on tape. And so he quickly resets them. They tape it. Sam is so excited about what he's captured on tape. He races the next day down to the radio station and asks Stewie Phillips to play the song on Red Hot and Blue, his nightly music program. And the phone boards light up. Sam knows he's got what he wanted. The imprint that Sam makes on Elvis cannot be overstated. He imprints on Elvis that it is about the sound of a record. So Elvis carries that to his dying day, that he will record a song however many takes it takes until he hears it. Not the producer hears it, not the band hears it, but once he hears it and feels comfortable with it, he'll do it. Hound Dog, one of his biggest hits, took over 30 takes to get on tape. And at times the band would be telling him, we've got it, Elvis, we've got it. Elvis would keep plunging ahead. So that was one thing that Elvis always carried to him. His band didn't always like it because there's lots of records where imperfections are there, but to Elvis it was about sound, and that was contributed by Sam Phillips. The second man who had a huge impact on Elvis for non-artistic reasons, I guess we could say, is Colonel Tom Parker, who ends up becoming his manager. Colonel Tom ends up booking Elvis on some, as an opening act, believe it or not, for Hank Snow, and is taken aback by all these teenage girls suddenly showing up at Hank Snow concerts and screaming and going crazy. And like Sam, he realizes there's huge potential here for this young singer to be a great moneymaker. So he begins to campaign on Elvis's parents and on Elvis to, I can take you places, I can take you places. After many months of campaigning, he finally wins the trust of Elvis's parents, and Elvis says, "You're my manager." And from there, Colonel Tom seizes the opportunity, starts playing off the major labels against each other for the rights to this young kid who's making these great waves in the South, and eventually gets a record deal out of RCA. Sam Phillips ends up getting $35,000, which was a huge amount of money in those days. That money was then, Sam channeled that to bring the likes of Carl Perkins, Roy Orbison, Jerry Lee Lewis, and Johnny Cash to a national stage as well. So it had, I guess, a ripple effect. Elvis and the Colonel's relationship, very different from Sam. Sam was obviously involved in the artistic side of the process. The Colonel was involved in, let's make money. I don't know rock and roll, I'll never know rock and roll, but I want to make as much money for you as possible. And so, very different relationship, but without both men, without the nurturing producer who would kind of guide Elvis artistically, without that person that's going to be the ruthless business person to maximize the potential of his client, there is without no doubt in my mind that Elvis would not have hit the national stage the way he did based on those two men. And I hope that my sharing the story behind the legend gives you a little bit more appreciation for where Elvis came from. And as Elvis always was famous for saying, thank you very much.